Hello, Sam's fans. We're back for another Facebook Live broadcast. As you know, every Wednesday, right around this time, we have Facebook Live with all types of people talking about music therapy, art therapy, about Sam's fans, obviously, and all kinds of things. And today, we have a special guest. So, Dr. Keith is a music therapist. He is currently living in Germany, which is also where I'm living. If you tuned in last week, you heard about sort of what I'm doing. So I'm over here in Heidelberg, Germany, studying music therapy. And Dr. Keith is one of my teachers here. So to start, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit of what you do currently and where you're from?
Be glad to. My name is Doug Keith, and I'm currently a professor of creative arts therapies at SRH University, Heidelberg, Germany. I teach in the German master's and bachelor's courses, and I teach in the English language master's courses. And my main administrative part of that job is to coordinate the English tracks in music therapy, and there's also dance therapy. I coordinate that. And I'm originally from Athens, Georgia. Go Dogs. And I've spent most of my life in Georgia, with long time spent in Germany, obviously, and in the Northeast, Philadelphia and New York.
Awesome. And now, are you practicing music therapy clinically right now?
I'm not practicing music therapy clinically. We had a clinic where I used to work at Georgia College, and I continued that until about 2011, small caseload, but then I stopped that.
Okay. Also, for anybody tuning in, make sure if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in or say hi. All right, so the next question, going back, I want to know first why you became a music therapist, so why it caught your attention. So let's start there.
Sure, I'll try and answer that within 30 minutes.
All right.
I was studying music at University of Georgia. That's my hometown, Athens, Georgia. And I was looking for some direction. And I knew that they had music therapy at University of Georgia. And I thought about that because I was thinking about music education, church music, or performance, not really. And I tried composition, but that really wasn't a good fit for me. And then I had some good friends in my life. I still have good friends in my life who live with different kind of disabilities.
Yeah.
Who some of them really didn't have disabilities, but they were just maybe quite older senior adults. And what I noticed about their involvement in music was that music was a bit of an equalizer, or music groups that we were in, maybe choruses or mostly singing things. They had an equalizing effect on us, and whereas one of my friends who was closer to my age, that she had a lot of barriers in school and socially. I mean, she was just my friend, but clearly I was aware that she was kind of different than most of the friends that I had. And but in choir, she was just an alto, and we need altos in a choir. So, and I've seen that throughout my life. I've seen people who have, well, frankly, we all have differences of cognition and perception and physical skills and all these things. And sometimes these group things have been really helpful in my life for me to help me see, oh, look what they can do.
Yeah.
And look how it makes it easier. It's not necessarily, it shouldn't be the onus of, I don't know if it should be, I don't know whose onus it is, but it's much easier to include people, seems like it that way. And that's very important to me.
Yeah, awesome. So that's how you got started, and then what was your training? Yeah.
The program at University of Georgia was, and as far as I know, probably still is, though it's not like I haven't really checked the curriculum. It's fairly behavioral and sort of music education based. And that has its role in music therapy work, but it's not everything. And so after I finished my bachelor's degree, I moved to Germany, to Heidelberg, where you're studying and I'm teaching. And was very immediately confused because the music therapy that I was learning about there was just a different animal. It had its weirdness, just like behaviorism had its weirdness for me, but it was different. And so I sort of divided my education into a couple of phases. One was behaviorism. The next is sort of psychodynamic or psychotherapy focused in any case, with the beginning confusion. And then the next part is integration, trying to integrate all these different things. So in Germany, it was a very different type of work that was being taught, practiced. Because I was going to say because. I don't know if because is the right word. Healthcare is delivered differently, education is done differently, and ideas about the roles of therapists and what sickness means are a little bit different here. The history is obviously different. When I returned to this, I did my internship, my sort of US type internship. I did that in Germany. And then I worked for 3 years in a psychiatric hospital as a music therapist. And then I returned to the US, to Temple University, which was very helpful to integrate all these things that I couldn't make really sense of. And I was lucky.
And then
go ahead.
And then you got your master's.
Thank you. I got my master's there. And in the course of that, I did the Nordhoff Robbins training in New York City and moved to New York. And then a couple of years later, I entered the PhD program in music therapy at Temple University. I finished that in 2005. It was new, and I was the first one to finish in 2005. My peers finished soon after me.
Nice. So we might actually have some students from SRH connected right now. So if you are a student, feel free to say hi or ask any question here for Dr. Keith. Now, so you already started talking about the differences in music therapy in the US as compared to Germany and maybe even other places. I know you've been to China and I don't know where else. Can you maybe explain a bit more about that, but then also kind of a bit simpler, because a lot of the people that watch this maybe don't know much about therapy, about psychodynamic and all this. So how would you explain that?
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
This is not meant to be any, like, I don't want to throw any shade on any country in my comments, okay? Because that's not really the right thing to do. I would say in the US, music therapy is it's spread out a lot more. It's spread into many, many, many different treatment contexts. And in Germany, there's certain traditions of music therapy, traditional places where music therapists work, and music therapy has stuck more to these institutions. That's one thing I would say.
Okay.
Without even talk about what these institutions are, I could.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I should do that. I'm sorry, I'm coughing a little bit. I need to get this lozenge.
Yeah.
In Germany, music therapy seems to be very focused on mental health care. And for many years, you'd ask a music therapist in Germany, what is music therapy? And they would answer, it's a form of psychotherapy. I don't know if that jibes with your impressions of what you're learning so far, but that's certainly what I was learning 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
And there were music therapists were trying in Germany were trying to establish their profession as a form of psychotherapy. I think in retrospect it has to do with licensure issues.
Yeah.
Good. In the U.S., I think music therapists work in a larger number of facilities.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more people building massive private practices. There seems to be. I've learned how entrepreneurial music therapists are. I'm from Georgia, and a lot of institutions there have shut down, especially psychiatric institutions, have shut down over the last decades.
Mm-hmm.
So music therapists have had to say, okay, what am I going to do to deal with the situation? I still want to do my work.
Yeah.
Especially around Atlanta, you have a lot of really strong music therapists developing private practices and doing really great things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Germany's a little bit more conservative in that way. Or it could be that maybe Americans are more used to paying for healthcare than Germans are. Because trying to get insurance reimbursement is a big challenge no matter where you are, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, well, first thing is that Rebecca says hi and thank you for your time.
Hey, Rebecca.
So thanks for tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was gonna comment on what you're saying. I think I definitely see that, and I think that's also interesting for our fans and the people who follow Sam's fans, because for us, our mission is really specific to children with serious illnesses, right? So it's in hospitals, and we extend that a little bit, but we're really focused on this population. And I think for some of the people who follow us to learn that music therapy can also be used in psychotherapy or these other contexts, I think that would be really interesting. Something
Mm-hmm.
new.
I wonder,
Um,
uh, I used to have, can I interrupt you?
yeah, yeah.
Um, I, this sort of intersection between the idea of psychotherapy and, in your case, hospitalized children, okay, used to sort of puzzle me until someone helped me. I don't understand it. I don't remember who it was, but they said, well, really, anytime you're dealing with patients or clients' emotions, you are doing a form of psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, psychotherapy was very broad. And so I think you could see that in many cases, a child who's hospitalized might need a form of psychotherapy. Let's put aside questions of whether a child is verbal or can write or can reflect on things like that, because that might not be relevant. We're often working on children's emotional state.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. And what I've observed from my limited experience is that you definitely have that. And then sometimes what I also see different in hospitals is that the music therapists work also on maybe physical or
Also,
motoric goals.
so
So I think that's quite a distinction. Now, just
yes.
kind of going back to this idea of music therapy in hospitals with children with serious illnesses, what's sort of your take on that? Have you practiced already music therapy in a hospital context?
I have not.
Okay.
Uh, I have friends who do that kind of work, and I've had students, master
Mm-hmm.
students, mostly in the U.S., who do that sort of work. Um, but that's not the work that I've done.
Right.
So what I know about music therapy with hospitalized children is that there's several goal areas, you might say, or several contexts in which music therapists work. I mean, I know this from the research base and from the research base and from what my peers have told me.
Right. Now, here in Germany, I haven't researched much, but is there much music therapy in hospitals here?
Um, I think it's growing, but I don't think it's very common in general or
Okay.
hospitals very much. You know, at SRH Heidelberg, we have some colleagues who've done really interesting work, who are doing good work with NICU.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's even more different in some ways from, let's say, school-age children and their needs.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Um,
Uh,
I don't know about music therapists working in general hospitals in Germany very much.
Gotcha.
I need to inform myself.
Right, right. we have another comment. So Patty she watches every broadcast. So thank you for tuning in again. And she is Ninki's mom, and Ninki's the founder of Sam's Fans. So
Oh,
thanks for tuning in again, and for
well,
sure.
it's an honor that you're here. It's nice.
Now I also had another question. So you've seen music therapy here in Germany, in the US, and even in China, like I was saying. So where do you see music therapy going in the next years?
I think, let me get my crystal ball out real quick.
Yeah.
I don't really have one, and I can't see the future, but I think it's going to change in different places depending on what happens with healthcare in those different places.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere that I know music therapists, there's a struggle with identity, and there's always controversy within the field,
Mm-hmm.
and there's controversy outside between music therapists and the rest of the world. Not controversy, but maybe difficulties communicating about what we do.
Yeah.
And people, it seems like in the U.S. that state licensure is progressing a little bit. When I was living in Georgia in 2012, a state licensure bill was passed for music therapists, and
Mm-hmm.
I just did a little bit of that, knocking on legislators' doors and talking to them. But it was really people who were developing their own private practices in Atlanta, and people who were involved in there's a state organization in Georgia.
Yeah.
And that seems to be one productive way to go about it, and that state licensures, because in the U.S. it's a state thing. In Germany, it's things are run a little bit differently. For a licensure bill to become reality, it has to happen on a national level. It's a smaller place, right? But it has to be brought to the legislature, I suppose, the national legislature, by a certain number of states. So it has to be supported by a certain number of federal states,
yeah,
for it to become reality here. In places which are maybe a little bit more dynamic in there, but Germany is fairly settled. Places that are a little bit more, or there's more change going on. It's hard to predict.
Yeah.
And if I think about a place like Thailand, right? So I've never been to Thailand. I don't know music therapists in Thailand, but I know that there are music therapists in Thailand who have studied elsewhere.
Yeah.
And often in the U.S. And there are U.S. music therapists who go to Thailand and do sort of workshops in hospitals and do some treatment in hospitals and things like that. And so these external influences will also influence to a certain degree how music therapy develops in a given country.
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm from Mexico, and I've also been all over the place, and I think definitely programs like the one here that are more international. For example, for me, it gives me tools that when I go back to Mexico, I could look at maybe expanding, or because in Mexico we don't even have an association for music therapy, right? It's
okay,
and that's true from many places. So I think I definitely see more interest in different places. And I just read a paper about music therapy in China, for example, in a journal. So I think it's definitely growing. We have a question from Rebecca. Let me see. So what are your thoughts on music therapy specializations? That is NICU, neurologics, hospice, and palliative care. If we continue with these more specific trainings, does it devalue the standard board certification? What are the implications of this internationally?
Well, Rebecca's trying to get me in trouble.
Yeah.
No, it's a really valid question. There seems to be a human tendency to want to specialize. And there's people who like to develop their own trainings and things like that, and they like to promote them. I understand that. There seems to be an evolutionary benefit to doing that in some contexts. But I kind of agree with you, Rebecca, that if we have this national standard in the US, the NTBC, the certification, if we have that, it benefits all of us if we emphasize our commonality. There just seems to be some factors working against it. Some of these these trainings, they are very different from one another. Some of these trainings last 3 days. Some of these trainings last 3 years or longer, and yet they want to. They sometimes claim that they're on the same level.
Yeah.
The only advanced training that I've done formally, is that right? Yeah, I guess so, is the Northrop Robbins training. And that took me 2 years. It was very intense and hard work. And actually, I did level 1 GIM because it was offered as a course during my master's degree. And that's a very intense, in my case, 3-day course. But they are very clear about what you shouldn't do or what you can do with that, which is basically nothing. You need to go into a higher level.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that she says sorry, but I think that was a great question.
Don't worry.
I think it's a good, valid question.
It's a question that's really specific to the U.S. I think.
Yeah.
But the behavior we see everywhere.
Definitely. I'm also
in some countries this used to be the case in the U.S. There are competing national organizations, and that makes it difficult to make progress, I think.
Definitely. You've also mentioned Northrop Robbins a couple of times, and I think that would be a good broadcast to have as well. For those of you who don't know, Northrop Robbins is a specific. How would you describe it? Music therapy approach.
Very music-centered approach. What I mean by that is there's typically not a lot of talk. You don't probably because it developed with children, a lot of them whom were nonverbal. It's an improvisation-based method. So a child client comes into the therapy room, and the therapist, typically at the piano, picks up on something that the child is doing, improvises on that, and continues to play to build this musical and interactive relationship between the therapist and the child.
Yeah.
That might be a short scenario
for sure.
The first session.
Awesome. Another question that I had was, for you personally right now, is there an area of music therapy that you're particularly interested in?
Right now, I'm very very engaged in the topics that my students have for their theses. And that takes up a lot of my brain space. That's something I also really like to do, because I like to guide people through a project like that, because it gives me a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So right now, there's been several. There was a really, really nice thesis that came out this summer on self-care among music therapists. And I have another student right now who is writing on the same topic. I'm actually giving a presentation next week, a workshop next week on self-care near Stuttgart.
Oh, nice.
A little further south. And but that's not an area of research that I've not done any active research in that area.
Yeah.
What in terms of my own interests, I continue to be interested in really the cross-cultural topics. It starts with me with USA and Germany, because that's what I know. But I'm thinking about you, for example, Sam, and when you finish your degree, you will have learned certain things which are native to Germany. You're pretty reflective, so I don't think you're going to try and take that from Germany. And let's say you go to, I don't know, just go directly to Mexico. I don't know where you're
Mm-hmm.
going to go. You take from Germany and go to Mexico. And take it 1-to-1. I don't think you're going to do that, but people do that without really thinking about what is the cultural context in which this work originated, and is it a good fit at all for where I'm working now?
Right.
I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes doing that kind of thing, and I hope I've learned from them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I
So
think
topics about helping, not helping, but how people navigate across cultural differences, that's something that's rather interesting for me right now.
yeah, for sure. And I think that that's also something that we could have a conversation later on here about that. And I was also thinking like self-care is something that really important. And also for our Sam's fans, some people who maybe don't know much about music therapy, is that music therapy sometimes is not as supported. And even we see it in what we do, right? Because in hospitals, sometimes there is not much of a budget to hire music therapists. And that's why we come in and we help with the funding.
Mm-hmm.
And self-care is also important because then music therapists also have to deal with paperwork, with trying to find grants, with many other things that leads to burnout and other problems.
Can I
So
plug in for something?
yeah.
I want to show you a book that I'm reading talking about cultural topics. I don't know if this is visible.
Oh, nice. Cultural intersections in music therapy. Music health
Yeah,
of the person.
I think it's a pretty good resource. I've only just started to read it, but there's a lot of current topics which are relevant for us.
Yeah, for sure. Just real quick.
That's really more for the music therapist audience than
Yeah,
the
for
rest.
sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just real quick. So Matob is tuning in and she cannot see the video. Is there anybody else who cannot see it? If not, it might be something with your computer, or I'm not sure. Hopefully that works out. And lastly, because we're here getting close to half an hour, but lastly, I just wanted to see if you had one or two stories about music therapy and the impact that you've seen it has that you wanted to share with us.
Mm-hmm. When I was working in Germany before, I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and part of my work was on what we call the chronic ward. There were patients there, people who were considered to have a chronic mental illness and had been sort of in custodial care, sometimes for decades, at this hospital. Most of that is gone by the wayside nowadays. And it was difficult work for many reasons. One of them was that the people were very difficult to. You couldn't predict what they were going to do. These folks that I was working with, but over time you could develop a therapeutic relationship with them, and that's very gratifying when that happens. I think because they, as a music therapist, I was offering something that didn't have as many barriers to them.
Mm-hmm.
This one man, probably, I don't know, 40, nonverbal, wandered around. He had been in the hospital there for decades. Never said a word. Didn't interact except through he ate and so forth. And but he was really very. It was very. Communication with him was challenging. Mm-hmm. And I was in my office one day, in the music therapy room, and I was seated at the piano, and I had a song book open in front of me. He came in, and I just started playing a song that I was open, and he started singing. Mm-hmm. And he sang. He had never said a word to me, and he sang the whole song. I didn't say a word to him. I turned the page, went to the next song, started playing. He sang every verse, and we finished the whole book. It was the strangest thing, and it was, I get chills now thinking about that, because it was the one time I knew him for, a couple of years, and the one time that he was able to show me in a way that I could understand him, that he was connecting with what I was doing.
Yeah. Wow.
That was very gratifying. And you
Yeah,
can't predict that. You cannot predict that.
Right. Yeah, I also got goosebumps. That's
Such a moment.
That's crazy. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe one more?
Sure, if you have time.
Yeah, just a
I'm
couple
going
more.
to talk about someone at the other end of life, at the very early years. There was a little girl. I worked in New York State at a preschool, mostly with children with special needs.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a really cool, diverse school. There were kids from Queens, kids from just different places. It was a cool place. And this is a very young girl. It was early intervention, so she was maybe about 2. And you don't make a diagnosis with children that young. That's not done, because they're really still developing rapidly. Anyway, it was I would say the topic of the header for this vignette would be excitement. And I wasn't playing the guitar. I was singing with the group, and I was holding a tambourine and giving it to this child, and this child, this child. So I was basically using my voice to interact with the children. And the tambourine, that was the contact with me.
Mm-hmm.
And she got so excited. And I just kept singing, and she was laughing like this, like she was too young to sing,
Mm-hmm.
but she was laughing, and she was beating right with the beat of the music that I was singing. I can't really do that right now. Mm-hmm. And she was laughing uncontrollably, and I started to watch her, and her laughter went, and it shifted to tears.
Right.
And it was, and she was fine. But for me, it was, wow. I didn't know that these two things were such close neighbors. Mm-hmm. That excitement and happiness and crying, but at that age, they're very close to each other.
Yeah.
And the physical reactions you get, or the physical relationship, the relationship between our body and excitement, they feel the same, whether it's about crying or laughing sometimes.
Right. Yeah. That's a great story. Yeah.
It was a great moment. I mean, we went on to have many good sessions together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I always love hearing the stories from music therapists who have practiced for many years. We've had many in the past here sharing, and they're always great. And they show really what the impact that music and music therapy have on people from all kinds of perspectives, populations, stages of life, and just all across the board. Well, if anybody else has a quick question, maybe we could answer it, but doesn't look like it. My cousin connected, and he says hi, so he said it in Spanish, but thank you. Gracias. And
Maldito. Yes.
Oh, he's just saying that I'm really cool, something like that. Yeah. And just the last thing is that Zoe says, thank you for sharing the amazing stories, and that we are from different cultures, countries, but all have small wish to spread out the healing power of music. Yes, we do.
Hey, Zoe.
And also Patty says, thanks for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think this might be the longest we've done. So thank you so much for coming.
I will put people to sleep sometimes, so I apologize.
I think it was great. So thank you so much for joining us this week. And again, Facebook Live every Wednesday, usually at 3 p.m., sometimes earlier, but we'll let you know, and make sure to tune in to learn about music therapy, art therapy, and hear some amazing stories. So thank you again.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. See you, everybody.